How many of us have ever received a paycheck? Show of hands? That's what I thought. Everybody. Unless we're fortunate enough to be independently wealthy, we all rely on pay from work to get by, to cover our basic necessities, and make life a little bit more worth living. So, how many of you really understand what does it take to get from your hourly rate and the amount of time that you worked to what you actually take home at the end of the week or the month? Maybe a little bit of an idea, but maybe you don't really understand. You know that taxes come out and they pay for insurance, and there might be a few other things on there and we're not really sure what they're for, but somebody told us along the line somewhere that that was going to come out, so it's okay. And I make enough, hopefully, to cover everything I need, and I'm happy. I go home, I expect that my paycheck's correct. How many of you expect that your employer understands what it takes to get from your gross pay, or the amount you're paid per hour for how many hours you've worked, to your net pay, which is what goes into your pocket at the end of the period? Everybody expects that their employer understands this process. Would you be surprised to know that many employers don't, and that they can't guarantee that it's correct? So, the purpose of this discussion today is to give employees and employers a basic understanding of payroll, calculating paychecks, and really understand the start to finish a little bit better. It's not, expected to be a comprehensive, cover every situation, but give you a little bit of insight into start to finish. So the employee's salary, or the pay rate, times the number of hours worked, is the gross pay before any deductions, any taxes, anything comes out. Everybody can pretty much understand this. Then we're going to subtract out statutory payroll tax deductions and other voluntary payroll deductions. And what you're left over with at the end is your net pay. Some of the statutory deductions from payroll checks are obvious ones: federal, state and local income taxes, Social Security tax, Medicare tax. You might be surprised to know that you could be responsible for an additional Medicare tax. Child support and other mandatory payroll deductions are included in there as well. Some voluntary deductions, which you may not think are voluntary, but they're considered voluntary because they're offered and you agree to pay them: insurance, deferred compensation plans, that would be your retirement, flexible spending or health savings accounts, other savings accounts, and things like uniforms or other employer deductions. The employer, however, has a lot more responsibilities after the paychecks are cut. It's not just pay the employees, close the books on that period, and you're done until next time. The employer has to deposit the tax dollars that are withheld from the employee's accounts, prepare the employer's share of the payroll taxes, and remit them to the proper government agency by the time that the taxes are due. They have to prepare various reconciliation reports. You have to check and double check, trust but verify, and account for the payroll expenses through financial reporting. They also had to file payroll tax returns. These are generally quarterly or annual, but they all have due dates. They all have payment due dates. And it's obviously the best idea that these forms are filed on time, the taxes due are paid on time, and if they are unable to pay the full amount in time, that the returns are filed on time no matter what. Social Security taxes are about 6.2% up to the annual maximum. That's why I say about. It's not necessarily cut and dry. Medicare taxes can be 1.5% of wages up to $200,000. And then on top of that, if an employee makes over $200,000 in a year, the employer does not have to pay an additional tax on that, but the employee is responsible for an additional 0.9%. Employers are also responsible for federal unemployment tax and state unemployment tax and disability insurance. The employer has to remit all of those returns and the taxes withheld from the employee's checks and their payroll liabilities as well. So that's something that the employer does for the employee, which is one of the benefits of being an employee. Hopefully you don't have to worry about that. More employer responsibilities are reporting requirements. They have to make the federal tax deposits, employer's quarterly payroll tax return, or Form 941. They file an annual federal unemployment tax return and an annual return of federal income tax withheld. Wage and tax statements, or W-2s, all employees are familiar with seeing those, also have to be sent out by a prescribed due date so that employees can file their tax returns in a timely manner. Employers also have requirements to report with various state and local agencies, and employers can find links to state tax agencies on the web. For instance, Illinois is mytaxillinois.gov. Employers have a wealth of payroll options. They have to determine whether to pay employees weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, monthly, even annually. I don't know anybody who wants to wait that long for their pay, but that is the option that's out there. They have to determine whether the employees are going to be paid in a salary or a hourly rate for hours worked, commission, or if they'll be paid by piecework. They also have to decide whether they're going to use a standard payroll check, deposit funds electronically through direct deposit, or a newer option is using a pay card, which is basically like a prepaid debit card. Employers also have to choose whether they are going to process payroll themselves or a manual payroll, or if they will use software assisted like QuickBooks, or if they want to outsource their payroll to a payroll service provider. There are a lot of benefits to outsourcing payroll to third-party preparers. It streamlines business operations. They can prepare payroll checks and make payments. The payroll service providers remit payroll tax deposits, and they also can file payroll tax returns and prepare Form W-2s for employees. One thing to remember is that the employer's use of a payroll service provider does not absolve the employer of responsibility for mistakes, misconduct, theft, so that the employer has to really understand that ultimately they are still responsible. So it's important to choose a reputable company or software. A payroll service provider assumes no liability for the employer or the client's employment tax withholding, reporting, payment, or filing deadlines. Tips for an employer who's using a payroll service provider would be beyond recognizing that the employer is the responsible party. They should always use their own information as the mailing address, their own contact, their signature, versus their bond, and they should require the payroll service provider to remit payroll tax payments electronically. This means that the payroll provider would use the federal income tax website, irs.gov, or the state and local agencies would be able to accept electronic payments. A lot of the government agencies actually require electronic payments nowadays instead of writing a check or paying with the return. And the employer can find a list of payroll services that pass their assurance testing system on irs.gov. Remitting payroll tax payments electronically can allow the employer to track payments and make sure that they were made on time and in full. And using the employer information means that the employer is going to be the first person notified if there ever is an issue with a notice. The IRS never emails, they don't call. They may show up at your doorstep if you have a problem, though, so keep that in mind. Some resources for business owners that are available for employers, whether they process their own payroll or if they outsource their payroll, are obviously irs.gov, which I've mentioned, the American Payroll Association website, which is www.americanpayroll.org, and maybe unknown resource would be your accountant. whether you're having your payroll tax or whether you're having your personal or business tax returns processed by your accountant, many people don't know that their accounting firm or their accountant themselves offers small business payroll services. Another tip is to get a referral. Use your networking and your contacts of other business owners locally that have had good luck or a positive track record with a payroll service provider. There are large national firms like Paychex and ADP, which some of us may be familiar with. My payroll is processed through ADP. They can bundle a lot of services with the payroll, which can be appealing to a lot of small business owners that like to have a lot of things out of their hands and they just want to focus on the day to day operations of their business. One thing to keep in mind is that they may be a little bit cheaper than an individual small business payroll tax provider, but they may also try to pad the payroll services with other HR outsourcing or reporting that can end up costing a lot more in the long run. So it's really important to do your research, and using Googling it is maybe not the best idea because you can be inundated with a number of 47,000 results, I think it was when I searched, and it can be hard to sift through and find a good answer. So always talk to the other people that you know that have a business and find out what they use and what works for them. So now that we've gone over some of the basic payroll reporting guidelines and calculations to how to calculate a payroll check from start to finish, again, this is not meant to be an all-inclusive list. There are always special circumstances. There are always more things to consider. It's a confusing and complicated topic, which is always the reason why we recommend that employers be educated, do their research, and don't hesitate to ask questions. So now that everyone has a little bit of a better understanding of how payroll checks are calculated, are we ready to go out there and process some payroll? No, if you're not, then you can come and see me and I can do it for you.